So let's start with your latest big win at the BAFTAs for Best Adapted Screenplay. How did that feel Sunday night?
Felt good.
And so there was a guy there who's Prince something, who's under the firm belief that at some point he's going to become King of England. He must have been very excited to meet Spike Lee and come over and discuss with you your entire body of work. That's what I'm assuming happened.
That did not happen, but there was a whole, every person who won a BAFTA award was on stage, so they were going from...
So you had your moment. That was as close as it got. Okay.
That was good enough, you know?
Okay. So 6 Oscar nominations: film editing, music score, supporting actor, adapted screenplay, director, best picture. I just sort of did a rough calculation in my head that there's probably been, in the 91 years, about 450 director nominations. 6 of them have been black directors. If you win, you would be the first black director to win an Oscar in the 91 years. What would that mean to you?
Well, Jackie Robinson started in Brooklyn. There are a lot of firsts, so the first is never really the first, because Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson had to play in Negro Leagues before Jackie could get the shot. So there's people who put you in a position to be the first. You don't just wake up and be the first. There was somebody there before you that take the slings and arrows. Not that Jack didn't get those, but someone has to, take a beating to get where you need to be, if you're a person of color in this country.
Let's talk about this movie through these nominations and how you work through these nominations. So film editing. I would assume Spike Lee has a very heavy involvement, to put it mildly, in the editing of a Spike Lee film.
That's true, but I'm not an editor. And my longtime editor, Barry Brown, who edited School Days, Do the Right Thing, Inside Man, Malcolm X, he got his first nomination with he edited, we were editing School Days in 1987. So that's going way back. Another longtime collaborator, Terence Blanchard, a great jazz trumpeter, composer. He finally got his first nomination in Sunday Night. Even though he didn't win the BAFTA award, he won a Grammy in LA. So we're happy about that too. And Adam Driver got his first. He's gonna get many more.
Let's talk about casting for a second when
Right.
we get to that nomination. At what point in the process do you start thinking about casting?
The minute I've decided that I'm thinking about what film I'm gonna do. So casting is very early for me. Also, what the music's gonna be about, and who, and like a general manager, head of a sports team, who are you gonna get to fill the positions that you need to win? As simple as that. And as far as in front of the camera, you wanna get the best people for that particular role. And many times, timing doesn't work out. Like Alec Baldwin, we had talked for many, many years working together, and we found the time for his, I wouldn't call it a cameo, because it's what he does is great. So timing plays a lot in everything. Everything has to line up, and the stars did align with this film, BlacKkKlansman.
Yeah. And to move to the screenplay, before we start discussing how you worked on the screenplay, this whole project started as a phone call from Jordan Peele.
No.
Okay. That's what I thought I heard you say in another interview, but go ahead.
No, I said how I got involved.
Mm-hmm.
The book was bought, a script was written, then that's where I came into the equation. So it had been a project already. Ron Stallworth wrote, not about autobiography, but about his time being the first African-American detective in the Colorado Springs in Colorado Springs Police Department. Wrote a book, and many things happened, and Get Out hit, and the producers approached Jordan would like to be part of this, and they made a list of people, and I was the first one was called. And Jordan's 6-word pitch to me was, "Black man infiltrates Ku Klux Klan." And at first I thought I said, this is not original, David Chappelle did this already. I said, no, David made that up. This is a real person. I had not heard of Ron Stallworth, nor his story.
And so then you started digging into the story.
Yes, I was sent the book and the script had written already. And I called up my co-writer, Kevin Wilmot, let's take a crack at this. And we knew that if we could come up with stuff that connect the present with the past, then that would be a good way to tell this story. So it would not just be a period piece.
And how did he come into it as your co-writer? I met him this weekend in London. He's a professor in the Midwest.
Yes. Kevin Wilmot is a Jayhawk. He's a tenured film professor at the University of Kansas. And I'm a tenured professor at NYU down the block. I mean, not down the block, but downtown. Where, when I was there, Ernest Dickerson and Ang Lee, we were all in the same class of 1982.
And so as you approach the screenplay, I mean, one of the things that is a common challenge in screenwriting is the notion of, is this believable? Will the audience buy this? But what you knew all along is, well, this did happen. So that doesn't alleviate the challenge of, is it believable, necessarily?
No, here's the thing I was really worried about, because when I finally met Ron, I said, let me ask you a question. We talked on the phone first before we met. I said, how come they cannot tell a difference between your voice, who's the black Ron Stallworth, on the phone, and your white partner in person? And he said, there's only one time where we put in a script where I have something in my throat, but I still found that unbelievable. And it's true. David Duke swore he was speaking to another white Aryan, fascist, racist, what other words can I use, on the phone. And it was a black man. The Grand Wizard, David Duke. So I was, you could say that in person, but I didn't know if the audience would believe that these guys are so stupid. But the audience believed it.
Yeah. Well, it seems like on the David Duke side of the phone call that there is a couple of things going on. There's possibly wishful thinking, and then there's just an assumption that this is the way we think. This is the way that, this is normal thinking that he's hearing from this guy on the other end of the phone.
Well, David Duke didn't invent this stuff. This stuff is passed down. Blackface is passed down. It's part of American history. Now all this stuff is, I just find it curious that all this stuff is happening under the non-leadership of the President of the United States of America. So I don't call him by his name. I call him Agent Orange. Shout out to Busta Rhymes. He came up with that.
How about the Orange Menace?
You trying to rewrite Spike Lee right here?
I like Agent Orange. Because I mean, I was a kid in the 70s, and Vietnam, Agent Orange, that's some deadly shit. I remember that picture, that young Vietnamese girl running down the road and her skin on fire. So that's why I can make the connection between that guy and, what was that, Dow Chemicals?
Yes. Yeah, Dow Chemical made it.
Dow Chemicals.
Napalm they were
Napalm.
using.
So who did Agent Orange?
Yeah.
They did both of them?
That's another component of it all, yeah.
So, you know, we live in a very, very dangerous time, and I think that's one of the reasons why this film, you know, hit. You know, this film made as much money in international as it did, really split down the middle as it did domestic. And it started in Cannes at the film festival. And people are smart to understand that this is not just the United States we're talking about. If you look at what's happening in this new guy they got in Brazil, got the guy's name in Italy, Salvini, and it's just a rise of this right. It's become a phenomenon, and you see that it's the same, written from the same playbook, where you target somebody, and they're the reason for all the things that are wrong in our country. You've got to keep them out and preserve our heritage, our culture. And it is begun, it's happened again and again and again. And many times in the film, you hear the phrase America first, but that's not new. The Klan came up with that in the 20s, and that was used against immigrants. So all this stuff is just recycled.
We hear from filmmakers that there are films that they make because of the times they're living in, and others that are just great stories that they would have made this film no matter when they discovered this story. Which one of those is this film?
It's a great story. So, but again, I would have made it, but everything is timing. So this becomes more heightened because of the world we live in. And Charlottesville happened like 3 or 4 weeks right before we began the principal photography. And once I saw that, I knew I wanted that to be the coda. But first I had to ask Susan Bro. The mother had the hair. Her daughter was murdered. That was an act of American terrorism, homegrown. I mean, so often we're conditioned to think that terrorists automatically some Middle Eastern people or folks or ISIS, whatever you want to call them. But we terrorize ourselves more than anybody. After Charlottesville, we had the synagogue in Pittsburgh, and the letter bombs and all, you know, Oklahoma City. That was a terrorist act. So there's, I mean, we go, and school shootings, I think, are terrorist attacks. So we're the most violent country, I think, on this earth, and the NRA is not helping. And the politicians are afraid to confront these guys. They're getting too much money. But to go in the store and buy an automatic weapon, I mean, you're not hunting for an animal. You're going for human beings. So all this stuff is tied in together, I feel.
So you were certainly in script development and pre-production when he who shall not be named said that both sides were good people. Working on this material on that day when you heard that, how did that affect you?
Well, those words can go down to infinity for him. Because historically, that doesn't mean it's right or wrong, but historically, the President of the United States is thought to be the most powerful person on the earth, the leader of the cradle of democracy, and the one to lead us, give us guidance, whatever you want to call it, in tough times. He did not fulfill that duty as the President of the United States as I see. I find it very ironic at his State of the Union, where several times he had people stand up, and I did notice that one was a survivor of a concentration camp, and another, I think, if I remember correctly, landed in Normandy Beach with allies. Again, both were directly in opposition to the Nazis. When I see the Nazi flag, excuse me, when I see the stars and bars, for me, I see the swastika. And for him to make that statement, and I know he saw the footage in Charlottesville where he saw nothing but swastikas and a Sig Heil salutes. How could he not make a response that is morally correct? He's going to be on the wrong side of history for that. When historians go back and look at this turbulent times, of all the fucked up shit he's done, and that's a lot, Charlottesville is going to be up there, where he doesn't have the courage to denounce fascism, have the courage to denounce the KKK, the courage to denounce the alt-right, and the courage to denounce neo-Nazis. He didn't do it. He's on the wrong side of history. I mean, that statement is going to haunt him. It's going to haunt him. And I know what being haunted, I've seen being haunted means. I did a documentary called Four Little Girls, which was nominated for an Oscar. We didn't win. But it's about the bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church that took place September 1963. And what I want to do with this documentary to interview the friends, teachers, parents, relatives of these four girls, and let us, I don't use narrators in my documentary, let them tell us, let them tell the story of who these four little beautiful black girls, who, were their body had not been torn apart by dynamite, who they might have been, they were allowed to live. And on a whim, I put out a call to interview George Wallace. And he agreed to an interview. I never thought that would happen. And he knew, you could tell that he'd have long to live, and that I saw someone who is seen as maker, who knew that he's going to answer for that shit he did. And all throughout the interview, he was spinning an alternative version of history, like he did not stand in the hallway, stand in the front door, University of Alabama, Tuscaloosa, and stop Vivian Malone from attending that school. And it was sad, because he knew he was going to die, and he was thinking about whether he's going to go to heaven or hell, and he was sweating. And I think that same thing might happen to this guy, because there comes a time when I think, I'm not there yet, I'm 61, don't rush me, but there's come a time we're all going to come to meet your maker. We're going to have to atone for your sins, and that's the day of reckoning. And what we filmed in that interview is his recognizing, like, I'm going to have to pay, because of all, he was responsible for people being killed. He's the one that gave the green light to Sheriff Bull Connor to turn German Shepherds water cannons, just let the Klan run free. Half the police department was Klan. And another thing I like to say is that about this film, this, not many people know this, but Four Little Girls is probably the most supported film I made. That convinced me that film could change the world. One of the guys, one of the terrorists, the Klan's a terrorist group, homegrown American. One of the terrorists in the Klan who was one of the bombers, his name was Dynamite Bob his nickname was Dynamite Bob. Dynamite Bob Chambliss. J. Edgar Hoover and the Klan knew a week after who did it. A week after. There was a trial, but those guys went to jail. It was dropped. Four Little Girls opened at the Film Forum. And the day, I can't remember exactly, but soon before the film opened, I got a call from the FBI. And they said they wanted to see this film. The day the film opened, the FBI opened that motherfucking case again and sent those motherfuckers to prison. But J. Edgar Hoover knew, the FBI knew a week after. I think Four Little Girls came out 91, you could Google 91, 92. The bombing was September 1963. J. Edgar Hoover knew, they all knew. The guy's motherfucker's name was Dynamite Bob Chambliss. Birmingham was called Bombingham. The middle class area of Birmingham, I mean, I forgot that, I mean, it was like they used to bomb these houses left and right. So film can, you know, have a, it can do stuff, and that's my example personally of a film, you know, have an impact.
What is
Excuse me for my profanity, but when I think about the motherfuckers, gets me motherfucking mad.
We have a pro-profanity audience. They've just clapped for so,
fellow New Yorkers, how you doing? There's my profane Brooklynites in the house. Where you at?
Spike, what is it like for you personally when you're working with material that has so much emotional weight? I mean, I've been to Birmingham. I spent a weekend there. I went to a Sunday morning church where Martin Luther King had preached. I was in the memorial for the little girls, the museum, for a couple of hours. And then Monday morning, I flew out of Birmingham. I didn't have to carry that emotional weight for the weeks and months that you do while you're working on projects like this. What is that weight like?
Thank you for that question. It's a good question. Which it all be tonight. This is my man right here. We were drinking champagne a sunny night in London with the prince and the princess, Her Majesty. Mm-hmm. It's a responsibility. Mm-hmm. It's not a burden. I wanted to tell these stories for little girls. I wanted to tell Malcolm X. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X. Was told to Alex Haley in junior high school. That book has had the most impact on me of any book I've ever read. Now, when I read the book, I know I was going to do the movie because I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a filmmaker back then, but there are just some things that I'm a storyteller. So it's not a burden. you know, I'm not saying it's easy, but the stories I got to tell, you know, I've been doing it. I'm going in my 4th decade, and I hope I have another 20 years. Do a Kurosawa, one of my heroes. Because these stories have to be told. What's great now is that early on, I was only out there along with Robert Townsend, but it is so great. I'm so grateful to see many other people telling, and not just African Americans, but women too, people of color telling their story, because we all have a need to tell our story from our own particular perspective. That's just a part of being a human being, to tell the world, tell the universe, this is who I am, this is who we are, this is our story. And try to just sometimes negate the false stories that are out there. There's a scene in BlacKkKlansman where we have a very talented Corey Hawkins who went to Juilliard playing Kwame Ture and not Stokely Carmichael. He's playing Kwame Ture. And he talks about how growing up, I mean, that scene really talks about the power of media. That scene talks about how black people were led to think that they were inferior. He talks about how growing up going to Saturday afternoon matinees, he would cheer for Tarzan. Would actually cheer for Tarzan versus the savages, the natives. And he made a great, great analogy. He said, me doing that would be the same thing as a young kid was cheering Jewish people being marched to a concentration camp. That shows you how powerful the medium is and why people have to tell their story. One of my favorite photographic things we did in that scene is with the montages, the portraits, because it just makes sense. He's talking about, he says, again, this is a true story. Kwame did speak to the black students. He did come to Colorado Springs. And he talked about, he's talking to young college students, and he's telling them, you have broad lips. You have big lips, broad nose, your hair is kinky, come from many different shades, blue, black, the high yellow, the Creole to red bone, whatever it is, you were beautiful. And so that scene, I didn't write that. Kevin and I didn't write that script. We compiled several of Kwame's speeches. We put them together. And so to emphasize what we're saying, we would pick, while we were shooting like auditorium like this, in the side room we had another camera. So in between takes, I would go through the audience and pick different black people, but everybody's different. And then we pulled them out and shot portraits of them while we're doing the main thing in here. And then we incorporated into that scene so we could demonstrate, so we could visually see the many different, the beautiful versions of the people that we are. I thought that was very important because, I mean, it was not back in the day, you call somebody black, that was a fight. You know, it's people like Kwame Ture and even James Brown with this song, Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. That song is in the movie, but they're reciting the lyrics. So all these things are very, very powerful for people to believe themselves when they've been told from the minute they come out their womb that you're inferior, you're subhuman, and whatnot. And then the job, and then I always think about Native Americans. I'm not a big John Ford fan. I'm not a big John Wayne fan for those reasons. If you look at those films those guys did, they demonize Native Americans, savages, all types of stuff, subhuman. And the truth is that this country was built upon the genocide of Native people and slavery. That's the I mean, whether you like it or not, that's the truth. That is the foundation of this country. Genocide of Native people now live in the worst conditions. I wouldn't call them reservation camps, they're concentration camps. I mean, that's the real story's not been told, was, in my opinion, was done, especially a movie about what has been done to Native Americans. So, again, an example how TV, The Lone Ranger, Sidekick, Tonto, and in many, many films, cowboy films, where Native Americans made out to be, you know, savages and subhuman. So the American TV and American film has a history of dehumanizing people of color, and women too, homosexuals. So there's important that we bring more diversity so we could tell, maybe not rewrite the wrongs, but tell more enlightened, more truthful versions of these stories.
John David Washington has an incredible challenge in that scene you were describing about that speech.
Right.
Because he's got the job of sitting there, he has no lines. He has no lines. But you, it seems, are hoping that the audience is reading his mind or trying to read his mind, and the actor has the challenge of delivering us something to read. It's one of the most fascinating moments, I thought, just as an acting challenge in the middle of that movie, which is an acting challenge all the way through, because he's the guy who has to pull off your magic trick of making it believable that a black man is on the phone with a white racist who believes he's talking to another white racist.
Yes, John David Washington, the son of Pauletta and Denzel Washington. Gotta give moms love. The thing is that what I did was to help him is that when the camera was on John David, Corey was still doing his thing. So we had cameras on John David so he could react in time to what Corey was saying as Kwame Ture. And what we tried to do is, because here's the thing, he's the first black detective in Colorado Springs. His first job was to go to a Kwame Ture speech and listen to it. So if you're a black cop detective, you know, you're conflicted. It's complex. But what we tried to do, what we hope we convey was that the more he was hearing that truth, that knowledge and wisdom coming from Kwame, is like, oh shit, this starting to make sense. And then he's like, uh-oh, like, he's ready to raise his hand all the way up. He said, oh shit, I'm undercover. Let me bring it down. But he does say power to the people. So I'm glad you brought that scene up, because that's where we wanted to convey that he's conflicted. And there's another scene in the film where his character and Laura Harry, who plays Patrice Dumas, they talk about something which I feel is within the African American community from the beginning. You know, this discourse, this discussion, this debate, how we're going to advance ourselves as a people, from the inside, from the outside. Go all the way back to W. Du Bois versus Booker T. Washington, Malcolm Martin, and Du Bois talked about, really probably the best, talking about the duality of being African American. You're African and you're American, and this schism, this two-ness, you know, and give you a heart attack. And with going back to Malcolm X, at the end of Malcolm X, we had two quotes, one from Dr. Martin Luther King and one from Malcolm. And one, Malcolm's like, how nonviolence all the way. I mean, Martin and Malcolm was, look, we have to defend ourselves. And I've come to believe that we're going to move forward. It's got to be a mesh of the two. You know, Malcolm said it best. He said, you know, it's good that I'm good for Dr. Martin Luther King, because they rather deal with him than deal with me. So people, we got to find your lane. I say on my set all the time, find your lane. Well, you know, you don't even, this is not even you know what you're talking about. Stay over there, do your job. People, everybody I've come to, I know I'm being repetitive, but I've come to learn this. Everybody has their own way to go. On the way they see things, and it may not be the way that I'm not talking about the President of the United States, though. I'm just talking about on a more personal level. And Malcolm, and it's not a coincidence that when Malcolm and Dr. King finally found a common ground, that's when they got assassinated. You know, and add the fact that when Dr. King started talking about economics, poor people's campaign, and especially when he started talking about Vietnam, the war is immoral. President Johnson said, like, yo, that's like you stab me in the back. I give you all the civil rights stuff. Then you say that the war is immoral. He wasn't around after that much longer. So we have a very complicated history in this country. And I think history has shown that when we get together, that's when things move forward. I tell my friends all the time, President Barack Obama did not become president just by black folks voting for him. We couldn't do it alone. So it's a coalition of people come together, you know, on the path of righteousness, you know, and that's how we move the country forward. Civil rights, and we go back, Civil War, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights. It's been a coalition of people. And it's going to take that coalition. I mean, it wasn't over the midterm election. I know this is your thing, politics, so I'm just trying to, a little bit, you know. President Obama said, I read it and saw it too, that you might agree with this coming election might be the most important presidential election in history, United States of America. Do you believe that?
The next one?
Yes.
Yeah.
The next one. And that doesn't motivate you for all of us to come together. And we got to turn this ship around, because we're going down the drain. And stuff that's happening, I mean, it's amazing. It's not amazing, but it's sad. How can the President of the United States put in effect a move where infants and babies are snatched from their mother's arms and then have nothing in place to make sure that infant can be reunited with their parents? Children in cages. They still don't know. I don't know the number. I'm not quoting a number of this. They still don't know. They're still kids. They don't know who their parents are, where they are. Parents know where their children are, but the Slickton said, well, we're not going to care about them. You know why? We should not care about them because they're murderers. They're rapists. They're drug dealers. And we should build a wall to keep them out. You got a question about the movie?
I do. I have a question about the movie, and this comes
But
from...
this is the movie, though.
This is the movie.
That's the crazy thing.
So this comes from me having the honor about, I don't know, what, 8 years ago, Spike, 9 years ago, of working with Spike Lee, because MSNBC decided to go all out when they were launching my show, and their first advertising campaign for my show was directed by Mr. Spike Lee, okay? So we did about 3 spots. And so in that process, I got to be on a Spike Lee set with the Spike Lee crew. Now, I've been on a lot of film sets before that, working in the drama side of episodic television and in other capacities as a producer, writer, all that. I had never seen a crew like Spike Lee's crew in a couple of ways. You hear all this talk all the time now in Hollywood about let's make a giant effort to try to hire more women, and let's make a giant in the crews and in the directing spots and other spots. Let's make a giant effort to try to bring in more minority people in crews. You go to any crew, you look at any film set in Hollywood, it tends to be on the order of 90% white, somewhere around there. When you're on Spike Lee's set, you are in a different place with a completely different crew, and it is family unlike anything I've ever seen on a set. It is the best crew I have ever worked with by far. The whole team is assembled very personally and held together through the years by this guy. And I know when Sunday night at BAFTA and at other times when you get up there and you get to say thank you with awards, what you're never going to get is enough time to thank all the people on that crew who are below that name, Spike Lee director.
Thank you very much. It's true. From the very beginning, when I was at NYU, I had the mindset that if I was able to slip in the door, I was going to try to bring as many people with me, and women, just everybody, the young, who's hungry, who's talented, wanted to work. For example, one of the nominees of Best Costume Designer, her name is Ruth Carter. Her first film was School Days. She did Do the Right Thing, Mo Better, Jungle Fever, got her first nomination for Malcolm X, got her second nomination for Steven Spielberg's Amistad, and now I hope she wins for Black Panther. So there are a lot of people that are, but even more so, now that I've been a teacher, I have so many students now who are working in this industry. And the industry is not really set up for people of color, women too, to succeed. So I've just tried to do the part I can do. And I just, I don't want people to stick around, forever. Sometimes they gotta go. Because, you got the old guy in the team, he was good 5 years ago, but he's still hanging on. It's a tough business. And you gotta let talent, again, I keep going back to sports. The best teams have always had the seasoned veterans and the youth. You need that combination because that makes things go. If everybody's their first job, they know the hell they're doing. Everybody's old, they're burnt out and they're collecting a check. So it's so much stuff revolves around chemistry. Chemistry is a real live thing. Vibe is a real live thing. It's energy. We all know this. How many times you got in a room and you want to get the fuck out of there and turn right around? All the times oh man, it's you could feel vibrations, you could feel energy. And people with bad energy are a cancer. They can fuck everything up. They gotta go. They gotta go. I mean, I've never been hesitant in firing somebody. and they weren't doing their job, and they're making problems, gotta go. It's cutthroat. But I'm not gonna let this person, you know, sabotage the movie. The movies, these things are my life. Nah, motherfucker, you gotta go. I don't use that. I don't say it like that. But that's what I'm feeling. You can't, remember that? For Motown heads, you know, back in the day, that song, "One Monkey Don't Stop No Show." Gotta go. That's not the second line, but it's you gotta be, people have to be committed. This film, BlacKkKlansman, everybody in front of and behind the camera, extras. You know, we had a big thing in Brooklyn. We had a calling for afros. We had 6,000 people show up. You know, some people try to sneak in with the wig, but I got a wig detector, an Afro wig detector, and so they just got pulled out the line. Like, sorry, but you're not gonna make it.
The amazing
We're just freestyling up here. Come on, stay with us. Stay with us.
The amazing thing about this crew and about Spike is that they bring that commitment and that professionalism even to a 30-second spot for an MSNBC show. I can testify to that. Spike, before we go, 1619, it's a 400-year anniversary right now of the beginning of stories that we have been telling. You've just told another story in BlacKkKlansman that is a result of what happened in 1619. We are not close to covering the 400 years in our storytelling, and there's so much more to be said. What does this 400 years and what does 1619 mean to you now?
Good way to end this. I want to thank everybody for coming out too. Thank you very much. Thank you. 1619 is a historical number. 400 years ago, from 1619 to 2019, 400 years, our ancestors have been here. The first slave stolen from Mother Africa brought to Jamestown, Virginia. And as I get older, I really made an effort, which has become successful, in trying to link my ancestors. And many times, you know, when shit was going right, you know, I always found courage, understanding, wisdom of my ancestors, because whatever I was going through, it was nothing compared with what our ancestors were going through. The work from Kansas City in the morning to Kansas City at night, to have your family broken, sold apart, to be whipped, to have the danger of being whipped, castrated, hung, beat, whatever, on a moment's notice. If Mazda gets mad at you, if you're a woman, knowing any moment you might be raped by Mazda, and here we are today. You know, who'd ever thought to be a black president? You know, you think about all the stuff and how much African Americans have done, despite the odds. But we're still not, this country is still not there. I mean, this whole blackface thing, I did a film about that in 2000. The film was called Bamboozled. And it's just like, one of the major criticisms of Do the Right Thing was that I not have the answer at the end of the movie. I not give the answer to racism, prejudice. I don't know necessarily, I'm not going to speak for all artists, But I never thought it was my job as having the answers. I thought my job was to be a storyteller and put this shit out there and let's discuss it. One of my most gratifying moments was Do the Right Thing was because I would go to all the theaters. And the movie came out, lines around the block, even though it opened up the same day as Tim Burton's Batman. And the theater owners were having a hard time because people were not just leaving the theater. Some of you might have been some of those people. People got up their seats slowly and having these deep conversations with people they don't even know. And they get out of the seats and then they have another conversation in the lobby. And the theater owner's trying to push them out because they got a line around the block and they got to get these people in. And so people were talking about that film. Talking about it. And that's what's most important for me. You know, if you could have something that could provoke discussion. Not to say necessarily any great discoveries going to come out of it, but just people just talking about what they just saw sitting in the dark for the last 2 hours. Why did Mookie throw the garbage can through the window? Who started the riot? Who was right? Sal or bugging out? Well, Sal has a point. This is America. It's his business. He can do what the fuck he wants. Bugging out has a point. Yo, my man, we're in the middle of bedside, do or die. I don't see any Italians around here. I see all black and Puerto Ricans. You can't give some respect and put up one African American on the wall of fame. So both Sal and bugging out, you know, they got an argument. A good argument. Sal, this is my business. I can do what I want. Bugging out, look, and bugging out saying, look, without us, without brown people, you don't make any money. What are you gonna do? That's good drama, but it's also true.
We are going to have to leave it there. I am so sorry to say, because I've got 2 hours to do on Do the Right Thing, but we're going to let Spike's art now speak for Spike Lee for the next couple of hours. Thank you very much, Spike Lee. Really appreciate it.
Oh, I forgot. You're seeing the movie, too. Oh.